All right, it is 1 p.m. So I think we are ready to start off this webinar. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us of our first Master Gardener webinar of 2023. Hopefully you're having just as beautiful a day as we are here. It is lovely and feeling like spring, which always makes me very happy. We have a really great lineup of webinars this year, and we look forward to welcoming many different speakers to our stage over the coming months. We will continue to share upcoming webinars through the EMG biweekly update, so be sure to keep an eye out to get registration links and learn about those upcoming webinars. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. This session is being recorded. Zoom probably already told you that. All recordings are posted to our EMG webinar archive, and I will share that link in the chat box in just a moment. This presentation will also be made available, and Laurie will talk a little bit more about that, and that will also be posted to that webinar archive section of the website, so it is easily accessible to all of our participants. Please use the chat box to ask any questions that you might have of our speaker. We will get to those at the end of the session, and we'll get to as many of those questions as we are able to. So with those housekeeping things out of the way, I'd like to introduce our speaker. There we go. Dr. Laurie Fox is a research associate at the Hampton Roads Agricultural Research and Extension Center, or AREC, as you'll often hear with cooperative extension lingo. She develops resources, demonstrations, and training programs focused on urban water quality, residential stormwater management, and sustainable and resilient landscaping practices. She is a huge supporter of the Extension Master Gardener program here in Virginia, both locally and throughout the state. And we are very excited to welcome her here today. Laurie, with that, go ahead and take it away.
All right, thank you very much, Kathleen. So it's my pleasure to be with you today. And this is going to be kind of a unique situation because what I'm going to do is tell you a little bit of a backstory about how this presentation developed. And then we're going to go through the presentation. So you not only get the information, but then what we're going to also do is discuss how you can take this presentation and customize it for your programs and what you want to do. And that's why Kathleen said this presentation will also be posted with the recording, so you can download it, tweak it to fit your specific needs, and then go ahead and use it. So having said that, it is my presentation that I am freely giving to you. It does have notes to go with each slide, so you kind of get what the point is that each slide is supposed to be making. All I would ask is that if you use it, just make sure that you credit wherever you're getting your information from, as well as your pictures. So give credit where credit is due, whether they're mine or somebody else's. But that's kind of a good practice. So this presentation came about because my husband and I purchased our home in this lovely neighborhood in Norfolk that has very older, mature trees in it. And we adore the neighborhood for that feeling that those trees create. And about a year and a half ago, I got really frustrated because every time I walked outside, I kept hearing chainsaws going. And this wasn't because of storm damage or anything like that. And I thought, they're cutting down the reason we bought our house in this neighborhood. And so I'm like, well, how can I do something about that? Because, you don't want to be a neighbor that goes and knocks on somebody's door and goes, you shouldn't have cut your tree down. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I thought about it. And I said, I think maybe the best approach that I could take is to ask to be a speaker for my civic league. They have 3 or 4 speakers a year for the civic league. And so I did, and they said yes. And I put together this presentation. And basically what I was trying to do is provide information on why trees are so valuable, because there's so many different reasons, and at least one of those reasons has to connect with everybody. But then also I wanted to make them think twice before cutting down a tree. And I know that trees have to come down occasionally. But then if they do, I wanted people to think seriously about replanting. don't just cut it down and be done. Understand how valuable trees are and be, motivated to replant trees to make up for the one that got cut down. So that's what the backstory is, and that's the goal of what this presentation is. So it's meant to be a very short presentation. You can stretch it to between 15 and 30 minutes, and you can, break the slides up or use whichever ones you think are most pertinent to whoever you're speaking to. But that's the intent of this, is to let people know the value of trees, make them think twice before cutting it down, and also make them think about replanting it. All right, so the value of trees, and you substitute your name and your extension office down here at the bottom. And if you want to use a different graphic or something, like if it's for a specific civic league, you can use maybe a picture of the entry sign to the whatever the neighborhood is, or something like that would work. But I'm giving you sort of the framework, and then you can adjust it to be specific. So the way I started this out was to very quickly bring this home, and I just went and got this map off Google and circled our neighborhood. So sometimes people have never seen an aerial view of their neighborhood, but ours is unique in that, we're surrounded on 3 sides by water. So our tree canopy is very valuable for, water management. But that way it just, focuses people's attention on, this is something, that we're talking about. It's in our own backyards, literally. All right, so River Point is my neighborhood. And what I did was just walked, before I did the talk, I walked through the neighborhood. And I didn't go, I wasn't nosy. I didn't go in people's yards or anything. I just walked. We're kind of in a loop situation here. And I just walked and actually dictated into my phone the trees that I saw in the neighborhood, some that were interesting and that I want to take a picture of and put in the presentation. But also what I was doing was inventory of what types of trees and species we had in the neighborhood. So what you'll see here are 2 trees that you see pretty quickly after you turn into our neighborhood. The upper picture is a southern magnolia, and it is the only tree in this big island at an intersection. And then the other tree is a willow oak that unfortunately has had significant directional pruning and also significant damage to its roots when this parking lot was put in adjacent to it. And you can see very quickly it's in decline. So just kind of showcasing some of the more unique trees in the neighborhood. And then just letting people know that we have a real mix, and that is so very important, that we have diversity of the trees in our neighborhood, because diversity means that they're sustainable. They take care of themselves and they last a long time. And it also means they're resilient, which means they recover quickly from damage. But diversity also means that it supports a large bird population, as well as, other things that benefits that we're going to talk about. So again, I'm just walking around the neighborhood. So in the upper left is a beautiful weeping cherry tree that's in somebody's yard, but it's very visible from the road. In the upper right is one of the city's infamous crepe myrtle street trees. And this is an older one, which has really beautiful bark. So just, talking to people about, it's not all about the flowers. Sometimes it's about the form, the bark, the winter interest. Sometimes it's just about the trees themselves being unique, as in the bottom picture. These are dawn redwoods. Most people would look at them and say they're bald cypress, but they are dawn redwoods, which is not something you see commonly as a neighborhood tree. And then trees provide, interest again year round. So at the time that I was giving the talk, and I took the pictures fairly soon or close to when I gave the talk. So the pears were in bloom, the deciduous magnolias were in bloom, which is the middle slide. And then the bottom right slide was the bud break on the maples in the neighborhood. But what this does is then you get people, hopefully they go, oh, that's in my yard, or I drive by that tree every day. And what it does is really connects them to what you're talking about. They feel like they have a vested interest in it. So along with the pretty pictures, you got to kind of have some information here. And so this is how I ease them into sort of talking about the neighborhood trees. I said, so it's a mix of native and non-native trees in our neighborhood. We have deciduous and evergreen. And this may be an opportunity for you to explain some of these terms. Again, you have to read your audience and understand what level they're at. But I would encourage you not to make the assumption that everybody is going to know what you're talking about, because sometimes people don't even know the most basic information, and you don't want to go through a presentation and be zipping along and then somebody, asks a question because they didn't understand something in like the first slide that you had or something like that. So it might be a good opportunity to explain some of these terms. In our neighborhood, we have trees that are in the landscapes along the shorelines, and then we have some wetland areas that also have trees in them. And then we also have a mix of city and public property, like city street trees, but we also have a small city park at the corner of our neighborhood. And then a lot of the trees are on private property. But the point being, these are one of the most valuable assets for, the neighborhood. And then if you want to do this, we have 44 different species of trees. And again, this number would go up if I had taken more time and, paid more attention. But this was literally just a 30-minute walk around the neighborhood. And what you see is on the left column, those are the species that we have the most of. So we have 5 different oak species, 4 maples, 4 different types of cherry trees and things like that. But it gives you a good overview of the diversity. And I use the common names simply because, again, those are things that people tend to connect with more than the scientific names. So, and then if you want to, you could, asterisk them, or, show the ones, do something to denote the ones that are native versus non-native. And then what I do is roll into the services that trees provide. And what I do is I have a lot of slides titled services, and then I break them down into specific categories of services. So to start off with, I just do a nice graphic here that shows a lot of the different services that trees provide, because again, one thing may not connect with somebody, but another thing will. So maybe somebody is interested in trees because they moderate, climate change. Trees provide shade and help reduce that city heat island effect or whatever. And that's good. But maybe somebody doesn't care about that. Maybe what they care about is the trees that provide nesting sites for the songbirds in the neighborhood. Or because we're on the water here, maybe the trees provide protection from some of our nor'easters and hurricanes. So whatever it is, one thing or another is bound to connect with somebody. So this is a sort of an overview showing a lot of the different things that trees do. And you can spend a lot of time on this slide and explain each thing, or you can then, roll into the specific categories, which we're going to go through now. And most of these categories, so like if you are a Master Gardener tree steward, it would be in your tree manual. Some of this I've never taught the tree chapter in the regular Master Gardener training manual, but some of these categories may be in there as well. Or if you go out online and look at tree benefits or tree services, these are the bigger categories that you generally find as far as how the services are broken down. So the first category is provisioning, which includes things like trees providing food, cleaning up the water. They provide wood and fiber, genetic diversity, medicines. They contribute, significantly to history. And what I chose to highlight on this slide is the longleaf pine, which is a predominant species in Virginia and was logged heavily by the colonists. in the colonial times. You know, it was wood that was exported, wood that was used in shipbuilding and a lot of other things. And so it has a significant place in our history as far as being a tree that was a significant at providing product that we needed for different activities. And again, you can expand on the subtopics depending on who your audience is and what you think might be of most interest for them. This one is something that most people connect with. Most people want songbirds in their yard, and this brings in the science. And if you're not familiar with Doug Ptolemy, for heaven's sakes, bring yourself up to speed. He's the entomologist out of the University of Delaware that a number of years ago put the scientific data to back up the connectivity between trees and birds. And it's not just that trees provide, you know, nesting habitats. You have to have the trees that the caterpillars feed on, because if you don't have those caterpillars, then you will not have songbirds, because that is what they feed their young, those juicy, soft caterpillars. Adult birds may eat seeds, but caterpillars are by far and large the biggest part of the bird's diet, both for adults and especially the young. And what Ptolemy did was put numbers. So, you know, if you want songbirds in your yard or your neighborhood, plant oak species, you know, because they support the most species of caterpillars for the moths and butterflies. So helping people make that connectivity between this particular service that trees provide in order for them to have something desirable in their landscape, which is the pretty songbirds. Trees also are really good at interactions with the soil. So they provide stabilization so the soil doesn't erode. You've got different communities in this soil food web, all of these creatures that are in the soil. That's why soil is so hard to study, is it's because it's such a very active component, and so much is going on all the time. And so tree roots stabilize it, keep it from eroding away, but they also provide channels so that stormwater infiltrates and you get good oxygen, and it keeps it the soil from getting compacted. So it's not only the tops of the trees that are beneficial, it's the bottoms as well. And you can pick and choose the key pieces of information, facts, you know, research, whatever it is you want to present here. You know, again, based on how you're reading your audience. They also, trees are really important for carbon sequestration. Now, go, move forward. There we go. All right, so we're moving into the next category of services here, and that is regulating services. So this is that heat island effect I talked about. The more tree canopy a city has, the cooler the temperatures are, because cities generally run 15 to 20 degrees hotter than the surrounding more suburban areas. Trees are also very beneficial for, they don't prevent necessarily, but they do moderate flood and wind damage from storms. They're very good at water purification because the canopies absorb a lot of rainfall that never makes it to the ground, but what does make it to the ground has gone through the tree canopies and has been cleaned. Trees are really good at also cleaning up pollution. And if you have, again, the diversity, the tree diversity, then that supports your beneficial insect population. And then those insects then help fight the battles against the undesirable insects. And so they keep things in check. So that means less pesticide use in the landscape. So the two images here are the urban heat island effect. And then also, and this may be something that you could get a map of your own city showing the tree canopy in your own city. And we'll talk about some resources of where you can get some information. All Right. So, phytoremediation, that's basically using plants to clean up the environment. And trees are very critical in that regard. You see here, it's willow trees that they're using to clean up some petroleum pollutants that are in the soil. Trees are heavily used over like in Chernobyl to sort of help moderate the radioactivity over there. So they're very important in that regard. Water quality, tree canopy is one of the approved stormwater management practices that you can use to get credit towards the Chesapeake Bay total maximum daily loads, or TMDLs. So, that's just one of the benefits. There's so many other benefits of trees, but if you can plant one tree and get multiple benefits, then that's fantastic, as opposed to putting in a stormwater management practice like bioretention or a swale or a rain barrel. And that really is all about water management. It doesn't have other benefits necessarily, like trees do. So a lot of your cities have programs where they are trying to increase their canopy coverage. But just again, some statistics, and I've cited all of these things in here. Just the amount of water, the rainfall that they intercept, 12 to 35% that falls on them that never makes it to the ground. And there are, research studies that have been done that document, just how much trees can absorb or filter. And so if you're looking at deciduous trees, 500 to 2,000 gallons per year. And again, that's because the leaves aren't on there, all year round. And then that's why your evergreen trees also then filter a higher gallonage per year. And then if you have 100 mature trees, that's approximately 140,000 gallons per year of water that isn't going down the storm drain, which is fabulous, because then that reduces the cost that the city has to pay for maintaining that storm drain, or when things back up and you get flooding and those types of situations. So it's a win-win for everybody, but especially from a cost standpoint of managing stormwater. And then, if you want to run statistics like, an inch of rain on an acre is 27,000 gallons of stormwater, or a half an inch of rain, like on your 1,000 square foot roof, is 600 gallons of stormwater, that you're generating. And then of course we have those massive freaky storms that come through every now and then that just, drop, just abnormal amounts of rainfall. Right. People learn things in different ways. And so that's why there's a real variety of images and text and graphics and things in this presentation. So, somebody may read the text, somebody may get more out of a picture. And then, somebody like me, who's a scientist, likes the graphics. So what this is a graph of pre and post, and then post development with stormwater management practices. So the way that this goes is, pre-development is just a natural ecosystem, and that's the blue line. And what you do is you start over there on the left corner of the axis at 0, 0, and that's when your rain event starts. And it rains and rains and rains as you go across the time axis on the bottom. And eventually that blue line is where you start to get runoff in a natural system, because the rain, it takes a while to build up to a point where it's not soaking in any longer, and it starts to run off. And then it has a small peak, and then it gradually, over time recedes. When we have development, which means impervious surfaces that water cannot infiltrate into, what we get is the black line. So if you go back to that 0, 0 on the axis, as soon as your rainfall starts, you get runoff, because there is no chance for it to soak in. And then you get this black line. So the runoff starts a lot sooner, and you reach a higher peak a lot quicker. and then it recedes very quickly. And that's why you get all these like sudden flash floods and things like that, or flooded roads or streets, very, very suddenly. People get caught off guard. But then what we're trying to do, and trees are a big part of this, is get to the red line. We're never going to get back to pre-development. So what we try and do is find somewhere in the middle. So again, if you're starting at 0, it rains a little, but the runoff doesn't start immediately. It starts, a little bit later than if you have impervious surfaces, and a little bit earlier if it's an all natural environment. And then it goes up, and then through trees and other stormwater management practices, you manage it, you slow it down, spread it out, soak it in your landscapes. And that's where the red line plateaus. And in doing that, you're again slowing it down, spreading out, soaking it in, so that it's not all running back into our natural waterways as quickly. Because with impervious surfaces, you're generating a lot more volume at a higher velocity, and that can be very dangerous. So that's kind of the explanation for this slide. And again, people interpret things in different ways, but trees play a big part in managing the stormwater. Okay, there we go. So you might be able to pull data on this like this from your own city, but if not, some eye-opening data. New York City, their street trees intercept rain and reduce runoff, and this it might be actually higher now. This is a couple years old. 890.6 million gallons annually. And then what they do is put a dollar value on that. So they say, and they're just doing averages here with what a tree would intercept. And then the value of that is $61 per tree. So that's $61 and over about 1,400 gallons of stormwater that each tree treats that doesn't end up in the city's storm drains. And so if the city has 5.2 million trees times $61 per tree, then that's, a significant amount of money that those trees are essentially giving back to the city, that they are not having to charge residents for stormwater management, and they're not having to spend on more expensive or repairing stormwater infrastructure for the city, and they're not having to deal with flooding in the city. So it is incredibly significant. And then again, they just give some examples here of specific species and how many gallons per year. And again, these are deciduous trees. If they're evergreen, the amount that they intercept is higher. Right, so moving into the habitat category of services. So again, this is more providing habitat for like migratory birds, songbirds. It's all about trees creating connectivity and what are called green corridors. So if you have trees in your yard, in your neighborhood, and then your neighborhood connects to a city park that's got trees, and then that park connects to a state park or another neighborhood or another city park, what you're doing is creating connectivity through the trees as opposed to through roadways, because wildlife doesn't travel on the roads. We all know how that ends up. And it's called these green corridors, because otherwise what you're doing is segmenting the green spaces within a city, and that's not good for species that need larger spaces and need to be able to move around between areas. And then the other thing with this too is the trees are creating genetic diversity, which again goes back to sustainability and resilience. We all know monocultures are not good. They don't maintain themselves over time, and also they're susceptible to whatever kind of problems come along, flooding, droughts, pest problems, whatever it is. So again, that diversity, not only of species, but within a species, diversity of the gene pool. So all the trees that come up from seed are genetically diverse versus a lot of them that are propagated and sold in the nurseries, and they're all exactly genetically the same because they're asexually propagated. Right, so moving into some of the cultural value or benefits of trees. This is a section that's kind of under utilized, underestimated, because this is stuff that it's really hard to put a dollar value on, but this is very important to some people. So maybe this is where you connect. You know, if you're talking to city planners, your city arborist, you know, things like that, then numbers of species, diversity, dollar value for stormwater management, those are hard, fast numbers that are important to people like that who have to justify the decisions that they make. But there's other benefits that are more nebulous and less easily documented, but they're equally as important. And these could be things like the spiritual value of trees. In a lot of cultures, trees are very important in that regard. They are very important for us to learn and know about and connect to, so they have an intellectual value. You know, in our parks and the places that we go for recreational activities, you know, trees play a big part in that. Again, like with the longleaf pine, they are significant in our history. You know, just if you want to look at some really amazing trees, just go to the Virginia Champion or Big Tree program and look at all the historic trees. I mean, it was on the news the other day about the emancipation oak over at Hampton University. So you know, they play a big part in our history. They also give us a sense of place. So if I say live oak, you automatically kind of assume that I'm talking about coastal Virginia. Versus if I talk about some of the conifers, then that's more the western part of the state. Or if I say dogwood, then you know mid-Atlantic and south east, right? So certain trees create a sense of place. If I say the Don redwoods, you automatically think of, you know, California. So, and then maybe one of the ways that they connect with people is the aesthetics, especially in regards to their property value. That's very critical. But there are documented research studies out there that show that trees reduce crime and violence. And these are studies that are done in when you compare more affluent neighborhoods with more tree cover to less affluent neighborhoods that don't have a lot of tree cover. And then it's also if you look at studies that are tracking trees at like downtown spaces or shopping malls or things like that, people tend to linger longer and spend more money in retail areas that have more trees. There are, I think they're called tocopherols. I may be wrong on that, but there are chemicals, phytochemicals that trees exude into the air that have been proven to improve our health and lower our anxiety. I mean, they've done studies where, you know, people come to a park and they take their blood pressure and then they walk along the little treed pathway and then they take their blood pressure at the end of the walk, and you know, their temperature, their blood pressure, their heart rate, all of that is significantly lower after having walked through some peaceful trees. They've done a lot of studies with children and ADHD or autism. and showing that being out in around trees has a significant impact on their brains. And again, these chemicals help reduce mental fatigue as well. So that's all health related. Trees also provide a lot of teaching opportunities. I just, in the next couple weeks, have a workshop coming up for Girl Scouts. It is a 3-hour workshop all about trees so that they can get their merit badge. The teaching opportunities about the history or about different types of trees, or like we're talking about now, the value of trees. And then there is a fairly new trend or movement called tree bathing, where you actually go out and practice conscious like meditation and experiencing trees, and it's pretty cool. So. Right, so property value. Again, this is a picture from my neighborhood. It just happened to have the for sale sign in the yard of the house there. And these are city street trees. And the furthest ones back are willow oaks, and the ones in the foreground are water oaks. And as you can see, they're fairly mature and really nice alley of them there along the street coming into the neighborhood. But they can increase property value as much as 20%. And if you have a house with trees or without trees, most of the time, the house with the trees is the one that's going to sell the fastest. Trees also make for more sociable neighborhoods because people get out and walk or sit in their front porches or front yards and meet their neighbors. The other thing that trees do is noise abatement. So if you have good dense tree canopy, then that helps reduce traffic noise, noise like from the airport, noise from noisy neighbors, those types of things. And then again, very good at moderating flood and wind damage. It really, it's as soon as they announce that it's hurricane season, everybody goes, oh, well, I need to start cutting down trees. I don't want them to fall on my house. But in reality, the trees will help prevent damage to your house. It's fairly rare that they fall on houses unless the tree has been compromised in some way. But they will help prevent flooding and wind damage to your property more often than they will cause damage to your property. So one of the things you can do is when you're talking to them, they say, well, check it out for yourself. You don't have to believe what I say, check it out for yourself. So if you go to the tree benefits calculator, you key in your zip code, okay? And then what you do is you go out in your yard and you measure, you identify what tree you've got, you measure it at 4 feet above ground, measure the diameter. So you key in the species and the diameter, and then tell them it's a residential thing. And then what that does is they calculate the value of that tree for you. So this is what I did. I did it for my yard. And then I did it for some of the city street trees. So I've got mature loblolly pines in my yard. And I have each tree provides $185 of benefits each year, and I have 12 of them in my yard, so 12 times 185. Okay, and then it'll tell you if you let this tree continue to grow and mature, then the benefits increase. But the cool thing about this calculator is it breaks down the benefits into this pie chart. So if you look, the most benefit is that it adds value to the property. The second highest benefit is stormwater management, but then it also helps with electricity because it shades the house. So that means I need less AC in the summertime. It improves the air quality and it sequesters carbon. So it has all these other benefits, and you can click on each tab across here to see more about each of those benefits that tree offers. And you can do it for any tree in your yard. Or any of the city street trees that are in the neighborhood. So it's kind of cool. And then you end with a slide that, maybe it's a unique tree in the neighborhood, or maybe it's a picture of a tree planting that went on in the neighborhood, or maybe it's just you in front of a really cool tree. This is a huge white oak in the botanical garden in Krakow, Poland. So there are other places that you can get information that's very specific to your city. This is all from Virginia Beach, because this is the talk I gave to the Virginia Beach Master Gardener Tree Stewards a little while ago. So a lot of your cities have state of the urban forest reports, or urban tree plans for the city that talk about the trees in the city, and what the current status is and what the future plans are. And this was just that's on the left. The top middle is just one of the graphics out of that plan, how they talk about the trees in Virginia Beach specifically. And then on the right is a picture of the tree canopy for the city. And then you could always double check and see if you have any state champion or Virginia big trees in your city, or even in that neighborhood. So this happened to be a swamp chestnut oak that's a national champion. It's not only a state champion, it's a national champion. And these are trees that oftentimes people don't even know are there, and that they can go, look at and see. So these are other types of pieces of information you can incorporate into the presentation. So that's the end of the presentation. And then what you're in now is the view where you can see the slide, and then you can see all the notes that are under each slide, making suggestions, or talking about how you can tweak it to make it work for you. And so it's a really short presentation. Again, it's really only meant to be 15, maybe 30 minutes max. Because you're oftentimes giving this to civic leagues, to homeowners associations, to garden clubs, those types of groups. And they generally don't have very long programs. And really, the learning takes place after you give the presentation, and there's that back and forth give and take with the questions. So this is what's being provided to you. Please take it with my blessing. Go forth and do wonderful educational programs on trees in your community. And at least with something like this, you don't have to create something from scratch. So I'm going to stop sharing here, and I think Kathleen's going to work with me on the questions that you guys had put in the chat, and I'm happy to take any of the questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Laurie. That was a really great presentation. A lot of good facts. And as you're talking about the champion trees, I found this publication from BCE about the champion big trees of Virginia. So everybody can go into that pub and check out if they have any local champion trees.
Yep. Yeah, you can go on there's a
cool.
website, and you can just search by zip code, I think.
Oh, very cool.
To bring them up. But I think Eric Wiseman in the Department of Natural Resources, he's the urban forestry specialist. I think he puts out sort of a report every year, an update.
Right. Yeah, this is the 2020 update. So I imagine we'll probably see a new one coming out pretty soon.
Yeah, the trees get measured every 10 years, because you have to document that they are still there, and then measure them so that it can be documented to see if it's still the biggest one in the state, or if somebody has found one that's bigger. But it's really cool.
Great. Well, we haven't had any questions come through yet.
Okay.
There were some positive comments about the presentation, about being able to bring neighborhood awareness, and especially on a level that your neighbors can understand. We just got another question coming in, so I will read this one for you to answer. And if anybody else has questions for Laurie, please do put them in the chat box. We have about 15 minutes, so we have plenty of time to get through some of these.
Okay.
All right, so this question is, I would like to get our HOA landscaper to stop blowing all the leaves from the trees, leaving the ground bare all winter, and then dumping mulch around in the spring. Any suggestions on how to present that kind of information?
You have to get most HOAs have a landscape committee, and you have to get them on board. And if they're on board with it, then somebody has to have a conversation with the landscaper. And a lot of times it's not a conversation with the guy that's doing the blowing. It's a conversation with the owner, because the guy that's doing it, he's just following orders. So unless you've talked to the owner, unless it's in the contract that this is the specific way you want things handled on your property, they're just going to do what they're going to do. So if there's a specific way you want something done, you have to communicate that very, very clearly. We did an example of this. We have a historic church in downtown Norfolk. It's the one that's got the cannonball in the wall. And most of that property has trees on it. And the roots were exposed because a lot of the soil had eroded away because they were blowing the leaves away. So we mulched and created mulched areas around the trees to cover the roots. And then we went ahead and planted ground covers so that those roots would be protected, that they wouldn't come in and mow or blow all the mulch away or anything like that. Well, it wasn't, the grounds manager for the church did not communicate clearly to the maintenance crew that was coming to maintain the property. And they sprayed and killed all the ground covers because they thought they were weeds. So it's a matter of clear communication with whoever is doing the maintenance. And if that means standing out there when their truck arrives and grabbing whoever the crew leader is and say, hey, this is the way it needs to be done. It's right here in our contract, then that may be the way that it has to be done. The other thing is, you can end your presentation by encouraging people to get involved. Maybe getting onto your civic league or your homeowners association landscape committee is a good thing. Maybe in Norfolk, they have Keep Norfolk Beautiful. That's the organization that handles all the volunteers for all the different projects that need volunteers in the city. Anybody needs volunteers for a project, they post the project on Keep Norfolk Beautiful, and that's where people check. By far and large, the most volunteers show up at opportunities where things are getting planted, whatever it is, but especially trees. People really like to plant things. So maybe you can get involved in a volunteer thing. Maybe you plant trees on your kids' school grounds for Arbor Day. Maybe Master Gardeners are giving away tree seedlings for Arbor Day or some event. I mean, we've got an event in City of Virginia Beach called Treetopia that's held at Mount Trashmore, and that's an educational event, and lots of trees are given away at that event. Norfolk Master Gardeners partnered with the city of Norfolk and the Norfolk Tree Commission to give out trees and awards at an event in a park. So there's all kinds of ways people can get involved in trees. Teaching the Girl Scout merit badge, just going and walking around your neighborhood. Maybe you want to put in a tree trail or label some of the trees in your park so people know what kind of trees they're looking at. There's just endless opportunities. Maybe you want to write something about trees in the neighborhood and put it in your neighborhood newsletter or on your neighborhood website or something. Maybe you just want to do a walk around the neighborhood and help people identify the trees in their yard. So there's all kinds of things. But the more people get involved, the more connected they are, the more vested they are in it, and then the fewer trees get cut down.
Absolutely. Thanks. There's been a couple questions about pruning, one about crepe myrtles, so that we don't prune
Crepe murder
over crepe murder.
Oh my God,
I did
yes.
put a VCE pub in there. If you have
There-
any other
Yep.
suggestions of good resources for crepe myrtle pruning
Yeah,
and how to avoid crepe murder, if you could share that. And then also a question about severe topping of large trees like oaks has become a fashion in this person's neighborhood. Do you have any material on good tree care?
All right, Crepe Murder, there is an extension pub on it, and it is spelled CRAP, not CREP, Crepe Myrtle. But yeah, that I've printed that publication off, and you know, they topped all the crepe myrtles at the bank that I go to, and I just, you know, threw it in the window when they used to have teller service, and said, you know, could you please pass this on to your manager? Because what they did to your trees is not right. I've um, you know, I've told managers of stores that whoever their landscape contractor is, you know, selling them unneeded services when I see topped trees. Um, you know, that's just, it's a very bad, very unnecessary type of practice that does so much damage to the trees, because what you're doing is compromising the structural integrity of the tree. And you know, if it's a problem that it needs to be pruned, you know, that way, then it's the wrong tree in the wrong place. You know, in crepe myrtles, you've got ground cover crepe myrtles, and you've got 40-foot trees and everything in between. So it's a matter of picking the right cultivar to go in the space. A lot of your bigger trees like oaks are topped, or what are called directionally pruned, because of utility lines. But if that's not the reason that these trees are being topped, I would find out who's doing it, and um, put in a call to the company, letting them know that, you know, that this is not an appropriate practice, or put in a complaint with the Better Business Bureau against the company for doing it, because they're selling something that people don't need, and it's harmful to the trees, and in the long run it's going to cause the trees to decline, because you're compromising the structural integrity, but also you're stressing it and making it susceptible to other problems. You know, and so yeah, it's a really bad practice, and somehow we've got to let people know that this is not appropriate. Maybe it's something on social media where you say, oh my God, did you see how they butchered those trees? You know, and maybe it's a shaming thing. I don't know. There's got to be a way to deal with it, and get people to stop doing it. And then if you're, you know, as master gardeners, if people are asking you for recommendations about, you know, who can do tree work, always tell them to go with a company that has certified arborists. You know, they don't pay those big bucks and go to those specialized training classes for nothing. I mean, that's very specific training that they have. I mean, anybody can take a tree down, and there's a lot of services out there that can do that. Not everybody can come in and assess a tree for how risk assessment, or what type of pruning it may need. And tell people, you know, treat trees as an investment. I mean, you don't go out and buy a car without doing some research first about what kind you want, right? And then once you buy it, you take it in for regular service, oil changes, tire rotations, you know, checkups and things. Trees are no different. You're going to have a tree, chances are, longer than you're going to have your car. And, you know, you need to periodically, you know, do some maintenance and keep a check on them. I mean, it's an investment. So maybe if you approach it that way, and have people think of it that way, um, it's a different way. And then as far as information, I apologize. The tree pruning calendars have been yanked. Tree and shrub pruning calendars have been yanked off the site, because we had somebody very rightly bring up to our attention that the timing of the recommendation for when things get pruned, we just had general recommendations. It will be much better when they're posted shortly, looking at recommendations for pruning things in the coastal, the Piedmont, and the mountain part of the state. So dividing up the timing of when you prune things. So the calendars will go back up. It's one of the most popular extension pubs, but we are revamping it to make the information a little more specific to the growing regions across the state.
That's great. And then once those are updated and back on the website, I can include those in a bi-weekly so that all of our master gardeners know those are back and
And
active.
there are some hubs just on general like pruning tools and how to make certain pruning cuts. And if you go to the Virginia Beach Master Gardener website, under their resources tab, they've got videos, they've got like YouTube videos. They did a really good video on pruning. Just really short, really sweet, and it's not anything that y'all can't do yourself and have, you know, as your own resource if you want, you know, or drive people to that site. But it talks really briefly about tools and how to make different cuts. And it was done by Doug Shoebridge, who is the current Virginia Beach Master Gardener president. But yeah, the Master Gardeners did that video.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. There was another question about learning more about proper pruning of trees around power lines. Is there a publication that you know about kind of trees and utilities or urban trees and some of those
You should not be
challenges?
doing it, number one.
No, yeah.
Usually it is the city, if they have their own pruning crew, or the city will contract it out to companies that's what they specialize in. And usually the timing is every 3 years for pruning around power lines. And it's a very serious, very hazardous job. And so if you see it being done, you know, please give them a lot of room and you know, don't distract them or don't run into the back of their trucks or whatever while you're looking at what they're doing. But the really cool thing about pruning around power lines, you have to know what kind of power line it is. There are transmission lines and distribution lines, and I don't remember exactly which one's which, but there are codes for pruning. Around one of them, it's like 30 feet. Around one of them, it's 50 feet clearance. So they're very definite clearance areas, depending on which type of line it is. And in some cases, you can't have vegetation that grows over 20 feet tall because the lines in the summer, they sag, and they can sag up to 20 feet, some of those lines in between the poles. And so they don't want the lines coming down and hitting a tree and getting grounded, or hitting the roof of a structure or anything like that and getting grounded. Or electrocuting anybody. So yeah, so the best information on that would either be through Dominion. They might have something on their website. I know the Arbor Day Foundation has something on their website about how far away from power lines you should be planting certain trees. And then it's expensive. You will have to buy it, but you could buy the training manual for the International Society of Arboriculture. So it's MAC-ISA. So it's the Mid-Atlantic chapter of the International Society of Arboriculture. And it would be the guide that they use to train people for that specific certification as an arborist.
Great. Thanks, Lori. Two more quick questions. We have about 2 minutes left in our Q&A.
I'll talk faster.
So the first one is, what is the healthiest oak for Virginia? Or do you have any oak species recommendations?
Well, I mean, you've got things like your willow oaks, your water oaks, your white oaks, your swamp chestnut. It really kind of depends on where you want it. What I have been looking at more recently are some of the smaller species of oaks that are a little bit better for smaller urban landscapes. But in general, oaks are a big tree. Any oak you put in is a good oak. We've got a lot of reds down here, not so many whites on the coast, but the white oaks are very pretty. They've got a whole different look to the leaf on them. So I consider any oak a good oak. There's just so many different native species of oaks that are good. If you're not sure about them, I would go to the Digital Atlas of the Virginia Flora online, and then up in the search, just type Quercus, which is the genus for oaks, and it'll come up with all of the native species. And you can click on it, and the cool thing about that website is that it shows you the state, and it has a red dot in each county where that particular species is native. So if you want to look for things that are really coastal versus Piedmont versus mountain species, that's a really good resource to check that out. So it's the digital atlas of the Virginia flora.
Thanks, Laurie. And then final question is, any recommendations for screening trees to recommend the HOA to replace Leland cypress? Any good
Screening trees. All right, so Leyland I consider like a medium-sized thing. And you're gonna want something then evergreen. So evergreen trees. Your bay laurels maybe, sweet bay magnolias are semi-evergreen. I'm sure there's, but they're just not coming to mind. Maybe your regular yopons might be good. Probably, and I'm going for native trees. Look, most places in the state now have those native plant guides from the Department of Environmental Quality that are just regional guides. I would look there and see what they have listed as far as your native evergreen trees. So again, you're probably going to want to go a small to a medium sized tree.
All right. Thank you very much. We are right at 2 p.m. So exactly 1 hour. Thank you all for joining us. We had a really great crowd today. And thank you, Laurie, for all of this wonderful information. Hopefully some of these master gardeners will be able to take this presentation back to their communities and make some impact around trees in their communities.
Right. And feel free to call me. I'm based at the Hampton Roads Research Center. And feel free to call me, or well, actually it's better to email me. I'm not in the office a lot because the weather's changing and I'm out teaching or in the gardens, but email me. I'm happy to respond if you have additional questions later.
Thanks, Laurie. And then don't miss our April session. That will be a deep dive into composting, and that's April 20th. And then Laurie will actually be back in May to talk about invasive species management. So if you want to hear her speak again, please join us in May. And then if you're interested in doing a deeper dive into trees and all of the wonderful knowledge that we can gain around them, our tree steward training is being offered as part of Master Gardener College this year. So we would love to have some of you join us for that program. And with that, I close our March EMG webinar. Thank you again for attending. Thank you, Laurie, for speaking. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.
Bye-bye, everybody.